It's Talking Pints. Yes, it's that time of the day, and I'm very pleased to be joined by best-selling author, journalist extraordinaire, man who has very strong opinions. In fact, a man whose opinions on the European Union make me look like a shrinking violet. Yeah, it's Tony Parsons. Tony, welcome to Talking Pints.
Good to see
very
you. Cheers.
Good to see
Cheers.
you.
Cheers.
Cheers. First today.
It tastes good.
And you're a watcher of Talking Pints.
I'm a watcher of Talking Pints. I'm happy and honoured to be invited. I can die happy now. I was hoping for an Oscar for a Best Adapted Screenplay and to be invited on Talking and to be sharing a pint with you at 7:30 in the evening. So
well, I'm very, very pleased you're here. Now, your story is an amazing story because you kind of go from council house boy in Essex, you're leaving school at 16. What O-levels did you get?
I got a handful of O-levels. I went to a grammar school that became a comprehensive, and I kind of drifted away from it. I mean, when it was a grammar school, and I was under the academic cosh, I kind of responded to that, and I did very well academically. And then we became a comprehensive, and it was, you know, we don't really. You can come if you want, or you can bunk off if you want. And you know, I was a very ordinary kid. I kind of went with the flow. You know, when there was an expectation.
So Parsons needed discipline, did he?
Yeah, when there was the expectation, you know, we're going to get our French O level a year early. When there was all that, and there was the Latin mottos on the blazer and all that, I responded to that. And then when they left when they didn't really care, I perceived that they didn't really care about us. I kind of let it drift. So I left at the first possible opportunity, and I kind of wasn't, you know, I was not sorry because I knew I wanted to write, and I thought,
you knew then, did you?
Oh yeah, very very early on. I thought it was the one thing that I was good at. I thought it was the one way of sticking close to something that I loved for a lifetime. I felt I just felt I knew I was willing to work, and I mean, I came from a background where people didn't have careers, people had jobs, and I didn't know anybody. It's not like my kids have grown up with journalists around and broadcasters around and musicians and all that. I didn't really know anybody. I wrote to Keith Waterhouse when I was 16.
Yeah.
He was a bit of a hero of mine. He was a working class boy. But he was brilliant at everything. Keith Waterhouse was a newspaper columnist. He wrote a best-selling book called Billy Liar.
Yeah.
He was a playwright. Jeffrey Bernardi's on. Well, he did all these things, and I wrote to him and 99 other people saying, "What should I do? Where should I go? What do I do if I'm a working-class kid and I want to write for a living?" And he was the only person who wrote back to me. He was the one person who wrote back to me, and he said,
he did.
"Yeah." And later I realised how generous that was, how easy it is to just ignore that kind of stuff. And he didn't. He responded to me and he said, "Dear Tony, get an agent." And I thought, wow, that's what I'm going to have to do. So I was working in a gin distillery, and I wrote a novel, and it got published incredibly. It wasn't a very good novel, but it got published.
You see, if I'd left school,
yeah,
and gone to work in a gin distillery,
yeah,
I'll probably still be there.
Drinking gin, I'm a bit. Me and gin, it's a bit like Keith Richards and heroin. You know, I kind of had my fill. You know, I had my fill. We had our time, and then it was over. Yeah.
But all of this was a. These were all stepping stones to being a writer. Yeah. What did your parents think about? I mean, your father was a war veteran.
Yeah, my
decorated.
My dad was a Royal Naval Commando in World War II. He was in Italy. He was at Monte Cassino, invasion of Sicily. He was very badly wounded on Operation Brassard, which the history book's called Bloody Little Sideshow, which was the invasion of Elba.
Picture of him.
Oh, that's my old man. Yeah. After the war, and he got the Distinguished Service Medal, and he was always a little bit. And that's an incredible honour. That's the second highest award for valour. And but when they thought he was going to die, they told him he was going to get the VC, and so he was always felt a little bit robbed. He got a DSM, you know, which is an incredible, unbelievable honour.
Well,
but
I'm sure you'd rather have your dad than a posthumous VC.
And get born.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but he was.
So did he encourage you? Did mum and dad encourage you?
My mum was very creative. My mum had 6 brothers, and she was self-taught piano player. She wrote poetry. She was very creative. So she kind of understood, I think, more than my dad did. When I think my mum understood the creative impulse and, you know, the wish and the aspiration to tell stories, to kind of break out of the world that we lived in. And And I think my dad didn't get it as much. And he said, the one thing he said to me was, I don't know anything about this writing game. I don't understand what you're going to do. I don't know if you're going to get your heart broken. He said, the one thing I'd say to you is keep earning. Whatever you do, keep earning. Dream big, but keep earning. And it was great advice because it made me, you know, because it made it more like a job. It made writing more, you know, that I was aware that I had responsibility to my loved ones, to my family, people that I support. You know, that I just had to keep that money coming in. So that's why I've always kind of, you know, written for newspapers and magazines as well as the books.
Yeah, actively, and you still. I mean, you've worked for everybody over the years. You've worked for the Mirror and
pretty much everybody.
You've been at the Sun for 10 years or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and you do your Sun on Sunday.
I do, yeah, and you know, and print journalism is changing. So many of my old colleagues have, you know, have left the industry, and I'm, you know, I feel like I'm a milkman. You know, I'm happy to still, you know, be giving the housewives, you know, a bottle of my Gold Top every Sunday morning. You know.
Well, how much of your work's online now?
Yeah.
I mean, the newspaper itself. The newspaper itself. Obviously, I can read what you've put in your Sunday column, which I always do. I can read that online if I want to. But do you yourself, as a writer, are you using all sorts of blogs and different platforms?
No, I don't really. I'm old school. You know, I'm old school. I like print. I like newspapers. And with the books, you know, I prefer a solid book. I prefer a real book rather than the Kindles and the other stuff, which is very important these days. And in books, you know, the sales are like 50-50 now. Yeah. So it's very, very important. But I just like the feel of, you know, I like those inky fingers.
But Fleet Street, you know, when you joined what was actually Fleet Street, you know, and the newspaper industry was buzzing and it set the agenda and it you know, it did turn elections. It must have then been a very exciting place to be.
It was, and, you know, whenever there was a new editor at the newspapers that I worked for, the first call that they got was from 10 Downing Street. You know, because they were important, and they could turn history. They were influential on history, and I think that's been lost. But you know, I still believe in newspapers. I still think that when there are great events, great historical events, you know, like 9/11, like what we're going through now with Ukraine, I still think newspapers are important. I still believe in newspapers.
They are important, but you're not exactly backwards in coming forwards, are you, in terms of what I mentioned earlier? I mean, you are... When did you first become a Eurosceptic?
I think, well, I voted, the very first time I voted was in the 70s referendum. Yeah. And I voted, as the country did, I voted to be a part of this common market. Yeah. And because I thought it was, you know, I bought the line that it was the future, that it was just you know, and all the stuff about the loss of sovereignty and your country's identity disappearing. That was, you know, the small print that we didn't read. We didn't read it as a country. I didn't read it as a young man. I mean, I think, I mean, by the time we were campaigning to save the pound, it just seemed to me that it was no longer an economic project, but a political project. You know, and if it had been an economic project, if it had just been that common market, I think the British people, it would have been so easy to keep the British people within the European Union if they said, look, you know, we understand that a country that hasn't been invaded for 1,000 years sees no reason to give up its national identity. You know, we haven't been conquered. We haven't felt that Russian or German jackboot on our necks. So there's no reason why we should give up who we are. There's no reason why we shouldn't continue to be who we are. So I think by the time we were fighting for the power, I was like looking at the number of times that the Germans had changed their currency in the 20th century and thinking, well, yeah, they had to change their currency, but we didn't. So why? And what was interesting about that time is that there wasn't. It was still. You could still have an opinion. You know, you could still be. You know, I believe that we should keep the pound because I think it's best for my country.
It's a big moment, wasn't it?
It was a big moment. And but one of the people that I was campaigning with was Bob Geldof. And Bob Geldof was very, you know,
everyone's forgotten that,
and everybody's forgotten that, and that shows how we've become polarised. And now there's this, you know, if you're on one side, then
we won it, Tony. But I mean, you're very disappointed with the results.
I am disappointed. Yeah, I am disappointed. I can't, I kind of almost feel bad about saying that I'm disappointed. But I feel that pretty much every promise has been broken, and some of those promises I think would have been easy to keep. You know, the promise of once we're outside of the EU,
5% VAT.
The VAT.
How about that? That was an easy one, wasn't it?
That's not an intractable problem. That's within the government's gift.
And controlling borders.
Yeah. Well, controlling borders. You know, it should be controlling borders should be keeping out who we want to keep out, but letting in who we want to keep in, and that's you know the people. I think the British people. I mean, I've been married to a foreigner for 30 years, and I think that this is a generous, big-hearted, tolerant, inclusive country. I think we've got nothing to apologise about for the way we treat the rest of the world, the way we treat people that come here. But you know, there are people here that are crying out to give a home to Ukrainians. You know, people really respond to the story, and they can't do that, because there's the paperwork. You know,
and should we be ashamed of slavery? And is Winston Churchill about? I mean, how do you see it? I mean, the campaign against Churchill. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I think that's madness. I mean, I was brought up to believe that he was a great national hero, and I still believe it, and I'll go to my grave believing it. I think, you know, by all means, learn about slavery, learn about this country's role in slavery, but that includes
and how we did we abolished it
in 1807. 25,000 British Navy men died enforcing it. Yeah, learn about that too. So I'm all in favour of education. I'm all in favour of that. But don't just learn one side of it. You know.
Now the books. You've written book after book after book, and this
the new one.
Is the latest one, The People Next Door. And you've written books, and how many books have you sold?
Few million, somewhere in the million, somewhere in the low million.
It's pretty cool,
somewhere in the low million. Yeah, it's not J.K. Rowling, but it's kind of, you know.
Well, it's still pretty good, and you made a few quid out of it.
Yeah.
What works? Is it your observations on life, on
I think
do people read your books and think, I've been through that, or I'm feeling that way?
I think there is that. I think there's a universal quality to the books, and Man and Boy was my greatest hit, and it's a really simple story, and it's about a father and a son, and it's about your parents getting older and saying goodbye to your parents. And the things that we all go through, and I think it's like a great song that just strikes a chord in your heart, and you feel that it's been written about you. So I think there's a lot of that. They're quite.
You obviously felt you had it in you from an early age.
I really did. You know, my parents got married when after my dad was really, really, really badly injured. His torso was a massive scar tissue, and he came very close to dying, and they kind of seized the moment and got married very young. They were teenagers, and then they couldn't have a baby, and I think this was devastating to both of them. My mum had 6 brothers, my dad had 8 sisters and 2 brothers, and I think that they thought, and of course there wasn't, so they were kind of banging away for 10 years, and then kind of gave up, and they were going to drive through Italy on their motorbike. My dad loved Italy, spoke fluent Italian, was in love with the Italian people, and then I came along, and because they'd waited for so long, they both had very, very clear ideas about what I was going to be like, and my dad wanted me to be a tough guy. My dad wanted me to be, he didn't think I could ever be as tough as him, but he wanted me to be tough enough, and so he wanted me to box, and he wanted me to be a scrapper, and my mum wanted to sit me on her lap and read me Rupert the Bear stories, you know, and so my dad bought me this boxing thing where you stood on this plank and you punched it and it came back and hit you in the face. I thought, I think I fancy Rupert the Bear, and so it was Rupert the Bear and my mum that made me a writer and a storyteller.
Well, you've been a huge success. And just a final thought. What would you say to young people who are setting out, embarking on a career in writing, who've got that burning passion that you had? Yeah,
I'd say to anyone, whether they're going to be a writer or anything else, just stay close to the things you love. You know, just identify the things you love. You know, be prepared to sacrifice things for the things you love. Be prepared to work when other people are knocking off. Be prepared to put the hours in, and you'll have a reward in life. That's what I'd say.
Tony.
Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you.